Hello. One thing I think we can all agree on is that in the last few months, there has been a glut of articles trying to help us understand how COVID will change the world of recruitment, of talent acquisition, and work in general. They're nearly all well-meaning and by and large are sensible to varying degrees, but every now and then there's a humdinger that deserves a special prize for its utter nonsense. Here's one that I thought worth sharing. It was a piece in the Times from someone who works for a technology platform. It said, decades old dynamics have crumbled practically overnight. Change is the new normal, and the only certainty is uncertainty. So tell me, when was anything ever certain, and when was change ever not normal? Certainly not in our lifetimes. As I say, utter nonsense. It actually reminds me of that other particularly infuriating phrase used primarily by people trying to sell you stuff, VUCA. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Essentially, four words all meaning the same thing. I ask again, when was the world not ever VUCA? If you're still not sure if you agree, let's take a gallop through the last 100 years. At the start of the 1920s, the world was dealing with a pandemic that left up to 50 million people dead, but which was also known as the Roaring Twenties. And in Britain, we finally achieved universal suffrage. In the 30s, we had the Great Depression, the rise of fascism, leading inexorably to the 1940s, which I think most of us would agree were pretty VUCA, although maybe not that ambiguous. So the 40s were just VUC, as in VUC'd up. The 50s gave us the first military action of the Cold War, as well as massive proliferation of nuclear arms and the space race. In the 60s, as well as the Cuban Missile Crisis and the assassination of JFK, we had immense social change with the rise of feminism and the civil rights movements. And of course, a man on the moon. The 70s, often called the worst decade ever, although not musically, gave us the oil crisis, blackouts, a 3-day week, the rise of modern terrorism, and the invention of the mobile phone. We were back facing nuclear Armageddon at the start of the 80s. We had massive unemployment, creating the giza job and get on your bike generation, of which I was one, all of which seemingly very quickly then morphed into the rise of the yuppie and culminated with Black Monday and the subsequent very sharp recession. Unless you lived in Rwanda or Yugoslavia, the 90s were generally pretty decent and were bookended by the end of the Cold War and the launch of the World Wide Web. And then it kicks off again. The 2000s brought us 9/11, 7/7, wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, a massive increase in global economic migration, but also one of humankind's more impressive achievements, with more than 1 billion people being lifted out of poverty. In that context, I'm not sure the 2010s, by merely bringing us the rise of social media, Brexit, Donald Trump, and fake news, actually gets into the top 5 of VUCA decades. Although I do think things have got a lot noisier. So those of us of a slightly more mature vintage should all be pretty well used to lots of change. And for those of us who operate in the world of work, we should recognize our responsibility to keep things in context, do our best to not overreact, but at the same time acknowledge that at this point in time, COVID presents us with more challenges than opportunities, but that those opportunities will surely come. If you've seen any of my previous video blogs, you'll know that this is the part where I tell you about our amazing talent acquisition benchmark program. But to be honest, with this one, I just wanted to suggest that we all have a part to play in keeping a sense of perspective and trying our best to avoid meaningless cliches. Although if you really do want to find out how our benchmark program can help you improve your resourcing function, then the link is in the post. Thanks for watching. Cheers.